Yeah, I mean, I think again, part of like the blank page problem is you've got a hurdle that you have to jump over. Uh,
Yep.
these AI tools are just lowering that hurdle, so it feels like
Yep.
you're stepping forward. You're not having to like hurl your body over an obstacle. So, hey, Dylan, one of the things I hear all the time from people is like, what is beyond sort of like the funny things you do with AI and sort of making it tell jokes or write limericks? What really use is it for like day to day actual production? And one of the things that I've seen, and I know you and I have talked a lot about, is what I call the blank page problem, that AI helps you get over the hurdle of when you have like a report or a summary or some writing that you have to do for work, that you're able to sort of use an AI assistant to get a very quick first rough draft that then you can easily start perfecting. So is that something you've seen as well, or something you've had experience with clients about?
Absolutely. There are few things more terrifying than just a blank Google document or a Google Sheet, or just even if you're using your notebook, but you just open up a page and you have to start a project.
Yep.
And you have some idea of where you want it to end up, but just to get the ball rolling can be a little bit overwhelming, and so definitely on our team, we found so much value in starting a project with AI as a copilot and sort of getting a few brainstorming ideas started and then going on from there. So something that I've started doing, especially recently, is I will just sort of like brain dump and be as explicit as I can in my first prompt. This is my job. This is what I'm working on. These are some of the things I've been thinking about. I'm not sure how to do X, Y, and Z, and blah, 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 blah. And like, let's start from there. And just to see kind of where that goes, because I have all these ideas swirling around in my mind, and then plugging them into AI can get you a really good starting place.
That's great. Let's start there and sort of tease out that sort of scenario a little bit. So I do a very similar thing where I'll open up just the interface to like OpenAI, ChatGPT, and either in the general prompt space, the 4.0 or 1.0 or whatever version you're on now.
Yeah.
They change names every 3 months.
Yeah.
But whatever interface you're using, kind of do that brain dump. So let's just walk through it. Say you've got a report to write. Well, for example, this morning I had to summarize a report that was given to me from an outside contractor, where I had asked him for a 1-page summary and he gave me a 12-page report. So
slightly over the required limit. Yeah.
Right. Well, it's an academic. They only write in 12-page summaries. So what I did is I said, hey, I want a TLDR summary of this report, and I want you to highlight this thing and make sure you explain this term. And also, your audience is the executive team, who is composed of these people. And so that's sort of the brain dumping phase for me, of just like, I didn't try to clean it up or give bullet points. I just sort of stream of conscious talk to it. And then I attached that report to that prompt and hit go. And it gave me a very excellent starting point for a sort of 1-page quick summary that I was able to share with people that wanted to know what the report had to say, but weren't going to read the 12-page report.
Right. Exactly. And I was going to say, talk about how we sort of figured that part out. Like, there's something about we've had so much experience playing around with it that we've sort of figured out some of those roles to give it, or like parameters to give it. So some of the things, I'm just repeating back what you said, but you said like, here's what I do. Here's the audience. So that's important. Like, this is the audience for it. Here is some of the goals that I have for this prompt that I'm going to give you, so that you're not only just giving it the prompt, you're sort of giving it a context for why and how you want it to work.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I think sort of the background of how we got to here was just playing around with it. And saying, write me a limerick about, turn this email into a limerick, or turn this email into the voice of John Cleves, or whatever it was. So you start by being playful, which gets you curious, like, oh, wow, it can do that. And you do it really quickly. So you start saying, okay, what if this was actually not just silly, but actually something that could be productive? And I think sort of identifying, let me back up and say, I think one of the things is we look at sort of GPTs or AI assistants, or whatever term you want to use for them, as really highly skilled, very quick, but ultimately not very bright assistants, like an intern that just graduated from the top Ivy League school, who knows everything, has perfect recall, but doesn't exactly know how to do what you know how to do. So if you just turn the whole task over to them, they'll run off in a direction that may or may not be profitable. But it's much more likely, if you give it sort of some guardrails and some instructions that are clear, you start getting results that are very dialed in, like identifying the audience, identifying the tone and voice, identifying sort of key things you want it to do. The sort of next lot, which we can talk about in a minute, the sort of next step of that evolution is actually creating custom GPTs, where you can actually really lock in a purpose for the GPT, or voice for the GPT, or a client that they're clearly writing for the GPT. But just getting started, like what I was talking about there, summarizing a report that I got, and I needed to turn around very quickly and send out a summary to a larger group of people. I didn't have an hour to fine-tooth comb, read through the report, and then make a list of things that I think were salient. I just needed a quick summary. And so, 5 minutes, I got what might have taken me 55 minutes to do previously.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I was going to say, before we even move on to the custom GPTs, because you're right, that is sort of the natural evolution of the workflow, is creating specific bots for specific tasks that you do all the time. But for our listeners who are like maybe just getting started, the way to learn how to do this, I think, is to start as broad as you can. So like, if you have a report from a 12-page report from an academic, you upload it to ChatGPT and you say, summarize this, and it will give you a summary. It's a 2-word command, summarize this. It will give you a summary. But then you can say, okay, like you said before, it may run off in a different direction. It may provide some like action steps that you're not interested or something. And you could say, okay, that was the wrong audience. It was the wrong tone. It didn't cover these specific things that I wanted to make sure it covered. So now then you can respond once it has given you the output. You can respond and say, less of this, more of this. Your audience is this. And then you can, as you do that over and over again with many different tasks, you sort of begin to pick up on like the vernacular of what gets it to do what you want it to do specifically, and what works best for your own creativity.
Exactly. And again, one of the things I've noticed, different AI platforms have slightly different tonal baselines. And so one of the things I'll oftentimes do if I'm not quite getting the right tone, or I feel like it's not quite where I want it to be, I'll cut it from like ChatGPT and OpenAI, go over to Gemini on Google and have Google give me a summary, or I'll say, put this in a more warm, friendly, compelling tone. And the more you can sort of give it those kind of instructions, it's not like, I kind of feel like a lot of the things I see online about prompt engineering are a little too much, meaning like it's almost like too cookie cuttery.
Right.
But if you can just sort of nudge it towards where you want it to go, you'll get the hang of like how to encourage it to give you what you're looking for in the tone and in the style that you're looking for.
Exactly. Yeah.
One of the other things you can also do is import, say you've written something in the past that you really like to this audience that you're trying to do this other thing to the exact same audience again. Right. You could import that old piece of writing, upload it into the chat, and just say, hey, here's a piece of previous communication or copy that I want you to replicate the tone of, the style of, the bullet pointing, whatever you want it to replicate. You just tell it and it'll automatically do that. And that also helps you get quicker to like where you need to be with the goal.
Yeah, I used to do I still do some music production, but I used to do a lot more. And one thing that was, the first step in when I was working on a project with a client is I would ask for some references and say, what do you want this to sound like? Right. And if we can have three to five songs that we're sort of aiming in the general direction of, then I have such a better idea of the constraints that are required to get there, as compared with just saying, make me a song. It's like, that's too broad. So that's, I think that's it's exactly the same situation with AI. The more narrow you cast your command, the more accurate you're going to get. And it just takes a little time.
Exactly. I mean, so that's sort of one case of like summarizing sort of a piece of content for another purpose, like repurposing content. Another way is like you may have to, I don't know, write a quarterly report or do something that summarizes kind of the past 3 months of, your team's work or something. One of the tools we use, an AI tool we use, is a tool called Parrot AI, which simply records all of our meetings, and it then turns all of our meetings into transcripts that are searchable. But then it has AI built into it as well that gives us summaries or to-do lists or all kinds of things like that. So one of the things you could easily do is, if you have a tool like Parrot, is to, basically output your last 3 months team meetings. And which for you would be a vast amount of reading and synthesis. But for AI, it's no big deal. And so you just export that transcript, which is probably hundreds of pages of transcript, and then do something similar to what we were just saying. Like, hey, summarize these meeting notes for the past 3 months and identify sort of key themes, key projects, key things to celebrate, important areas where we're struggling. You can do whatever you want to with that data. And it'll shoot out sort of like, here are all those things you just asked for. And then you can dig in deeper, like, oh, what day did we talk about that thing? Or when did that project finish? Or when did so-and-so, say such and such thing that was really so good? Or what piece of customer feedback did we get that we all were celebrating? Whatever it is. And then that gives you sort of, again, this place to start, like a quarterly summary that might seem like an overwhelming task. Suddenly you've got 2 or 3 pages of really good raw material that then you can start refining and say, okay, now Chat GPT, if you're using like Chat GPT, okay, Chat GPT, I want you to do this with these things. I want you to column. You can even create charts or diagrams or all kinds of things with that data, and then get you to a place where you're really using your mental energy and reserves to edit and refine and to add your spin or your thoughts on the content, rather than sort of using such an enormous amount of energy just to produce something that then needs editing, which can feel overwhelming.
Yeah, I know we keep saying this over and over again, but it's like what it does is it allows you to have a more executive, strategic, creative mindset about all your work. So you're sort of standing over your work as your little, a team of productivity bots are doing what they're doing. And you're able to see these connections between things, gaps that just maybe need to be filled that you weren't, if your head is in the middle of all these things, it's a little bit harder to step back and see that.
Yeah, I have sort of an image in my head of like an old school professor, wearing his tweedy coat, and he's got the pipe in his pocket.
Elbow patches,
elbow patches, and a nice worn chair, and then he just has all these grad students that run around doing stuff for him,
and he takes all the credit for it.
And he publishes the paper and gets all the credit. That's kind of what I think of about these kind of assistants, is like it has it just multiplies the ability for one person or one small team to do things that previously it took enormous resources and teams to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it's what I've noticed too, is that it actually feels like the sense that you get when you're sort of spending a day working in this mode is you do feel more creative, and you feel more, it's like you're making things happen so quickly that it feels fun, and it's very I don't know. I think sometimes when I bring this up to people who don't really play around with AI at all, they kind of give you a little bit of a look that's like, oh, are you really working then? Or are you cheating? Is this like, what's really happening here? And it's like, yeah, I totally see that. But it's like, I try to explain that you really do have this kind of creative flow like that you get into, which is pretty exciting.
Yeah. I mean, I think again, part of like the blank page problem is you've got a hurdle that you have to jump over. These AI tools are just lowering that hurdle. So it feels like you're just stepping forward. You're not having to like hurl your body over an obstacle. You're able just to like, okay, well, let me just start here. Okay, then let me try this. And then let me do this. And all that didn't take hours and hours. That little, kind of process could take like 15 or 20 minutes. And you have something that you feel really like this is 60 to 80% really good. Right.
Yeah. And the democratization of knowledge there is, so what that means is most people can get something to 60, 70, 80%, but then where you come in is like you take it from 80 to 100. You create something totally new,
Yeah. And that's where your subject matter expertise is not being replaced. People, AI is going to take my job. Not per se, and not tomorrow. It's going to require you doing what you do really well at a higher level. So it does raise the bar. It doesn't remove your job.
Yeah.
But it also, like you're saying, it kind of makes doing more with less more fun too.
Yeah, totally. And you realize that there are all these other opportunities. So it like opens up this like vista where you're like, oh my gosh, I could do, like, I never even dreamed about I could do this thing before, but now I have the tools that I need to be able to do that,
I mean, what are some of those things you've seen in your own job, Dylan, that you're doing that you didn't think a year ago you'd be doing?
For sure. So, I mean, one of them for sure has a lot to do with generating images and graphics, and photography and even animation. Although we're not quite there yet, it feels like with video stuff, but it'll be there
coming.
soon. It's coming. Yeah, exactly. So, but yeah, I mean, my background is not in graphic design, but what I've found is that using some of these AI tools for image and media generation, I'm now able to, like we said with this blank page problem, I'm able to create a little collection of sort of inspiring images that I like, and then I can bring them into, I use Midjourney a lot. Midjourney, I'll bring the images into Midjourney and I'll have it describe the images. So this is kind of a cool feature, but you can upload the image and it will give you all this context for like what, probably like a real graphic designer could look at an illustration and give some of these descriptions, of like the style or the mode or whatever. So it gives you some of these, and then I can take those little pieces of descriptions about what makes that image, like why I like it, and I can use those in prompts to generate new ideas around our subject matter. So like, it's not if the original image is like of a skateboarder or something, like we're not selling skates, so we're not a skate company, but I can take what I like about it and plug it into our subject matter.
That's cool. Like I've also noticed in our team, like people will share things like ad ideas or copy or images with you and say, hey, could we do something kind of like this, but take it this way? And, I've seen people just cut and paste like ad copy from other creators, and that just feels very cheesy and very wrong. But when you sort of use other people's work as an inspiration and as a jumping off point, it's a totally different thing. And so that's what I'm partially hearing you say, is that AI has enabled you as a sort of creative lead on our team to actually take ideas and move them into inspiration rather than just kind of blindly trying to copy them.
I'm going to invent a term here, so hopefully this spreads far and wide.
I love new terms.
Yeah, this is a very Sam Wheatley thing right here, but I was like, it's like deep borrowing. Like you're borrowing work that other people have done, which people have done forever. So there's nothing new there.
All creatives do it, right?
Exactly, but it's deep because you can use the technology to really plumb the depths of what makes that piece of content inspiring to you, whether that's copy, images, video, whatever it is. And you can say, I actually remember I did this with an audio ad once, like a podcast ad that I realized was extremely effective. And so I went back and listened and copied down what the ad was and then put it into ChatGPT. And I said, break down the elements of this ad copy and give me like a format or a formula for how to implement this for my brand. So that's like great. You're borrowing the ad copy that the person already wrote. They borrowed it from somebody else. So that's like, you don't have to feel bad about that. But now we're sort of calling it deep borrowing because you can really dig in super deep and get a lot of help figuring out why it's effective.
Yeah, I really like that. And I really like, again, it feels like you're part of the creative process with that kind of use of AI, this sort of deeper use of AI versus these shallower uses of AI, which are tending towards just cut and paste, replicate. They're not enhancing your voice. They're just speaking in the voice of AI, whichever
Generic
platform,
AI. Mhm.
generic AI, which is kind of businessy, kind of
Yep.
boring. And so that when I hear a lot of critiques like in the media about AI, I tend to hear them critiquing what I'd call these shallower uses versus these deeper uses.
Right. And you know, the analogy that you could bring up is like the internet when it first came around was like, yeah, like, you know, you could have shallow uses of the internet, and it's not, but that's critiquing that isn't foreseeing where it could go, you know, down the line. So I think that's what we're trying to do, is figure out, we're trying to just get on board and figure out how we can use this to make our work better.
Yeah. I mean, I think you're hitting on one of our major themes of this podcast, which is AI for good. Like, how do we use this technology for, you know, producing good in the world? How do we use it for our own good? How do we use it for the good of our organizations and our teams and ourselves? Which is this deeper use rather than just this shallow borrowing of a technology.